Recording on. Tonight is always the shiur Nishmat Avi Mari Dov Ber Meir Ben Reuven Halevi. Also, Marati Rachabat Harav Michael. I also have two more tonight to add. One is my mother's mother, whose yahrzeit was this past Sunday, Chanabat Harav Al Tishol. My father's father, whose yahrzeit is this coming Friday, Reuven Ben Moshe Halevi. So tonight we have the privilege of talking about parsha of Emor. The parsha of Emor deals with basically a number of different topics, but the primary topics that includes are laws of Kohanim / Karbanot, and the laws of the Moadim, and specifically within the chapter that deals with the Moadim, which is what we're going to focus on tonight, are the laws of the Omer. And that's what we're going to work on tonight. So let's go right up and pull up the source that we're going to work on tonight. Okay, so if we look in the parsha, we're in chapter Chaf Gimel, which is basically the chapter of the Moadot, which we call the Chagim, the times that we are to cease working for a day, and sometimes we have a week where we celebrate different Chagim, and in the course of that chapter, we have the laws of the Omer, which, interestingly enough, we then have the laws of Shirat HaOmer, the counting, that leads us to the Chag of Shavuot. So a couple of points I want to make before we even start is, one, we in our tefillot call Shavuot Zman Matan Toratenu, the day or the time of the giving of the Torah. But it is very interesting that there is nowhere in the Torah that the Chag of Shavuot is coordinated or linked in any way to the giving of the Torah. That is strictly a tradition that we have. Second interesting point to note is that the Chag of Shavuot is the only one of the Chagim that does not have a calendar day associated with it. All of the other Chagim we are given the date and month, the calendar month and date within the month that the Chag takes place, begins or ends, and with the exception of Shavuot. So the Chag that we call Shavuot, which, by the way, in our parsha of Emor is not called anything. It really has no name. In Parshat Pinchas, it's called Yom HaBikurim, the day of the first fruits, and in Parshat Re'eh, in the chapter that deals with the Chagim, it is called Chag Shavuot, and as well as other places in the Torah in Shemot where it is also called Chag Shavuot. But here in our Parsha, it's not really given a name, and we're going to see that in a minute. So we start with the law, the chapter that precedes this chapter in Vayikra, the further Psukim up to Pasuk Ches, talk about the bringing of the Korban Pesach on the 14th day of Nisan, and the Chag that we call Pesach, that in the Torah is also not called Pesach, it's always called Chag HaMatzot. And then we begin with the following chapter. Right? Hashem speaks to Moshe and tells him the following. Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yomarto alehem. Speak to b'nei Yisrael and tell them, Ki tavo el haaretz. When you enter into the land, Asher ani noten lachem, which I, Hashem, am giving to you, Kutatemet kitzira, and you will reap cut that which has to be cut. Vavetemet Omer, and you shall bring an Omer, Reshit Kitzirchem, the first of your cutting, El HaKohen, to the Kohen. Now, first and foremost, the Omer, the word Omer, we've had before. We've had it specifically in Parshat B'Shalach in dealing with the Mun. We are told that everybody collected an Omer for each person in their tent for every day, except on Erev Shabbos when they got twice as much. And the Torah there has a very short pasuk that tells us Omer asirit ha'efahu. Omer, the word Omer simply means a measurement. It's a measurement of flour, wheat, whatever it might be. Like we would say a cup or 100 cc's or whatever we would use to measure something in a container. Omer was a tenth of an ephah. That's what it is. It's approximately the size of 42.5 eggs. If you can figure that out, how to figure out 42.5, and it comes out to about an omer of flour, I'm told, Comes out to somewhere around 1 to 1.5 kilos, depending on whose measure you're taking. However, having said all that, the Torah here just tells us that we're to bring an Omer, which is the first of your cuttings, to the Kohen. We're not told what this Omer is supposed to consist of, but we know from tradition that it is barley. One of the few korbanot that is not wheat. It is brought from barley because barley ripens before the wheat. So barley is the first of the grains that ripen in the spring. Therefore, we take from the first of the barley harvest and we bring an Omer to the Kohen. Benif et haOmer, he is to raise and wave the Omer lifnei Hashem, before Hashem, lirtzonchem, according in order that it should be for you, for a something that Hashem will find in your favor. Mimocharat haShabbat, which literally translates on the day after Shabbat. Yinifenu haKohen, the Kohen should perform this service of Hanafa, of lifting it up. Vasitem, and you shall also bring b'yom hanifchem et haOmer, on this day that you bring this Omer to the Kohen, you have to bring a whole series of korbanot. A keves tamim ben shnatol yolal Hashem. You bring a lamb within its first year as korban olah. Minchato, with it comes shnei asronim solat l'ov Hashem and yishel Hashem reach nichoach. A flour offering, which is not normal. Normally, for a keves, we bring 1/10 of an ephah, 1 isaron of solet and oil. Here we bring 2/10 of an ephah of flour mixed with oil as a korban. B'nisko yain revit hahin, again the normal standard amount of wine that we bring with every lamb that we bring is a revit hahin, a quarter of a hin, about 3 pints worth of wine. And then we're told, we are not allowed to eat from the fresh crop, from the new crop. We are not allowed to eat until this day, until you bring this korban to Hashem. Now, this mitzvah of not eating from what is known as chadash, the new crop, is a mitzvah that is fukat olam l'darotechem b'chol moshvotechem. All is always there. So you'll notice I've highlighted some of the words because we're going to see what the parshat have to try to help us understand what these words all mean. We are to count for ourselves from the day, again, from the same Mimocharat HaShabbat that we referenced above, which is Miyom Aviachem et Omer HaTnufa, from the day that you bring this Omer HaTnufa, that is Hanif, as we said above. Sheva Shabbatot, 7 Shabbatot. I'm not going to translate that right now, but Tzmimot Tiena, they have to be complete. Ad Mimocharat HaShabbat HaShni'it, until Mimocharat HaShabbos, the day after the Shabbat of the 7th one. Tispru Chamishim Yom, you should count 50 days. Because and on the 50th day, we bring a new korban, a new meal offering, a flour offering to Hashem. We are told, Mimoshvotechem, from our dwelling places, Taviu Lechem Tenufa, we should again bring a lechem, bread that is Tenufa, that is going to be raised before Hashem. Shtayim, we actually know, not lechem, not one loaf, but shtayim, shtei 2 lechems, shtei esronim, each one is an isaron, so together they make 2 esronim. Solet tiana, now these, the Torah specifically tells us, are to be solas, fine wheat flour, as opposed to the Omer, where we're not told what it comes from in the Torah. Here, with the shtei halechem, these 2 loaves that are brought on what the holiday we call Shavuot, on this 50th day, we are specifically told they are to be solet, like most karban minachot are brought from wheat flour. Chametz te'afena, but unlike most karbanot, which we know are generally matzah or non-chametz, these 2 loaves have to specifically be brought as chametz. Bikurim laHashem, they are to be the first wheat karbanot brought in the Beit HaMikdash for the coming year to Hashem. And then together with this lechem, we have a whole bunch of korbanot. We bring 7 kavasim and a par and 2 elim, 7 lambs, and a bull and 2 rams. They should all be olah, all is korbanot olah, minchatam v'niskayhem, and each of these animals comes with its accompanying flour offering and wine offering. All of that is Ishay Reach Nichoach Hashem. In addition, we bring we bring one he-goat as a korban chatat, and we bring 2 lambs, again, yearling lambs, but here, unlike all the other korbanot that we've talked about, which are olot, these are a zevach shlamim. Unlike all the other communal korbanot that are brought in the course of the year, which are generally either an olah or a chatat, these 2 klasim that are brought on this 50th day are zevach shlamim. This is the only communal zevach shlamim that is brought throughout the year. These specific things, the shnei chavasim, the shnei lechem, the 2 lechem have to be raised. The kohen should raise these 2 chavasim al lechem abikurim together with the 2 lechem to nufal lifnei Hashem. They were again raised and waved before Hashem al shnei chavasim together with the 2, as I said, the 2 lambs together with the 2 breads. Kodesh yul Hashem, and after they are waved, they are given to the kohen. The portions that are allotted normally to the owner of the animal, as well as to the kohanim for this zevach shlamim, are given to the kohanim. Then finally, we're told, after we brought all these korbanot, we are told on this day, this 50th day that we're of the counting, you should call it a mikra kodesh yalachem. It is a chag. It is a day. Kol melechat avodah lo tasu. We do not do any melacha. Chukat olam b'chol moshvotechem l'dorotechem. Again, it is a statute for all eternity in everywhere, wherever Jews dwell. Then we're given another mitzvah, which we have in another place, when you will cut the rest of your crop, when you harvest your crop, when you're harvesting your crop, you don't complete the corner of the field when you are harvesting. The leket kitzir chalot laket, and the leket, those stalks that drop from your hand while you're gathering them, you should not go back and collect. Leave them for the poor and the stranger. So these 2 parashot, as I said, of bringing the korban Omer, bringing the shnei lechem, after we've counted 49 days on the 50th day, we bring these two lechem and all the animals that come with it, are all incorporated in this week's parsha, in the chapter of the Moadot. So we're going to try now to understand a little bit about a couple of the terms that we brought up, which are Mimachar HaShabbat, the concept of Usfartem, what is counting, and what is this concept of Chukat Olam L'Dorotechem. And then, if we're going to have enough time, we're going to finish with the question I started with, which is, why is it that the Torah does not ever link this Chag that we just talked about? Firstly, it doesn't give it a name here, it's just the 50th day. But why does the Torah not link that with the giving of the Torah, despite the fact that we seem to say it's linked with the giving of Torah? And 2, why doesn't it have a specific day? Why is it linked specifically to this counting? So hopefully we'll get to all of that as we go through. As usual, we'll start with Rashi. Rashi simply says that it says, Beishit kitzirchem, when we cut the Omer, it has to be Sheti Rishona Likatzir. We are not allowed to cut before the Omer is cut. We're not supposed to be cutting any other crops and using them from this year's crops. Obviously, you're still using last year's crops. Hopefully, you've got enough left over, and you won't need the fresh crops yet before the Omer is brought. Now, Rashi tells us again, as we know, an Omer is asirid ha'efa, a tenth of an ephah. Kach leita shema. This is the name of the measurement. Was called an Omer. Kimo, as we said, by the man vayamodu ba'omer. They measured in using an Omer. So an Omer is some measuring cup that's called an Omer. That's the size of it. Okay, now we come to this ubiquitous phrase that says B'mocharat HaShabbat. On the day following Shabbat, we are supposed to do all this. So the question obviously arises: what is this B'mocharat HaShabbat? What does it mean? And Rashi tells us again, based on the Torah Shemal Peh, that B'mocharat HaShabbat means B'mocharat Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach. On the day following the first day of the Chag of Pesach. Now, interesting enough, Rashi, like we do, calls this Chag Pesach. But really, in the Torah, this Chag is, as I said, is called Chag HaMatzot. But basically, the Omer that we talked about is brought on the 16th day of Nisan, one day after we've begun the celebration of Pesach, which, by the way, for those who are in the Chutz La'aretz, happens to be the second day of Pesach. But here it's also the second day of Pesach, but it's not Yantiv, it's just Chol HaMoed. She'ima ta'omer Shabbat Bereshit. Rashi says, because I cannot possibly translate that Mimacharat HaShabbat means on the day after Shabbat, i.e. the first day of the week, Sunday, because if we say it's referring to the day after any ordinary Shabbat, we won't know which of the 50 weeks in the year it means. When do we decide to bring this Karban if we don't really have a specific week, Shabbos of the year to bring it? So we wouldn't know when to bring it. And Mimacharat Shabbat, again, he translates similarly as Mimacharat Yom Tov on the day following the Yom Tov. Okay, Tamimot Tiana. Remember, we said this counting has to be complete. The seven weeks that we count should be complete. Melamed, this teaches us Shematkil Umona Miba Erev, that the primary time for counting is in the evening. She'im Lokain Einon Tamimot. If I don't start counting till the morning, then when I finish the 49th day, at the end of the 49th day, and the 50th day starts at nighttime, if I didn't start counting till the first morning, then I'm not full. I'm not a complete day. The first day wasn't a complete day if I don't start counting the night before. So Rashi says that the Smilo Tiano is to teach us that we have to count from the nighttime. Now, again, Rashi tells us Shabbat HaShviyit, when it says the end of the seventh Shabbat, it means Shvu'ata Shviyata. So sometimes in this chapter, Shabbat means Yom Tov, sometimes it means week, but it doesn't ever seem to mean Shabbat. So if we go back to all the times that Shabbat appeared in these two chapters, it either means the first day of Pesach or it means week, even though normally Shabbat means the seventh day of the week. But in this case, Rashi goes through and says, here in this chapter, it doesn't mean that. Ad Mimacharat HaShabbat HaShvi, we are to count until the end of the seventh week. Below Ad Bichlal, we do not count the 50th day. We don't count, even though the Macharat, the day after the seventh week ends, is the 50th day, because that's where it says Tisbru Chamishim Yom, you're supposed to count 50 days, but it means you count up until the 50th day, Rashi says, Below Ad Bichlal. Because sometimes when we say the word Ad, until, we mean until and including. Other times we mean until, not including. So if I say until Shabbos starts, I don't mean 10 minutes later. I mean until Friday night when we light candles. Or if I say until Shabbos, I might mean until Shabbos is over. So Rashi tells us here that where the Torah says until the the day after the end of the seventh week, means we don't count the 50th day. As we know, we count only 49. We only count 49 days. On 50th day, that the bringing of all of these karbanot is not on the 51st day, because I might have thought it says you should count 50 days, and then the next day I would bring all the karbanot. No, the answer is we count 49 days, and on the 50th day we bring all these karbanot. And Rashi says this is really the midrashic interpretation, as we know from the midrash halacha. The way the Torah should be interpreted, it says you have to count until the day following the end of the 7 weeks. That I would have thought that we should count day number 50 should also be counted. I should make a bracha on the counting and count today is day 50, which we don't do. Mikra Masorah, so this is a mikra of the Torah that doesn't quite fit the plain translation, but we know its meaning because of our oral tradition. And then on the 50th day, we bring this mincha chadasha, this new meal offering, and hiya mincha rishona shehuva mina chadash. It is the first wheat offering that is brought from the new crop. Even though after the Omer is brought, we as individuals are allowed to eat wheat that is grown in the new year. We are not allowed to bring it on the mizbeach until after Shavuot, after the lechem has been brought on the 50th day. The Im Tamarek Karva Minchat HaOmer, but wait a minute, Minchat HaOmer was already brought. Rashi says that doesn't count. That doesn't count as a Mincha Chadasha. Why? Because it's not wheat, it's barley. And therefore, it can't count as an ordinary Mincha. So even though it has been brought, clearly, obviously, it has to have been brought 50 days before the Karban is brought on the 50th day. Nonetheless, it doesn't count as something new because most menachot, virtually all menachot, are brought from wheat flour. The only two exceptions are the Omer and the korban is brought by Yisota, which is brought from Seorim. Every other korban mincha is brought from wheat. Now, Pasuk said, from within your dwellings you have to bring. Rashi says this is to teach us that the shtei halechem is lo michutz la'aretz. The wheat cannot be cut outside of Eretz Yisrael to bring the shtei halechem. And it's lechem tenufa. It is lechem teruma shehu hamuram l'shem gavoa. Again, it is the same thing we had with the Omer. The same thing applies to the shtei halechem, that we are to raise it as something we're giving to Hashem. And therefore it's bikurim, which is rishonot l'chol hamenachot. Therefore, Rashi then adds in a parenthetical thing, even though we've already brought the Omer from Seorim, if a woman had to bring a mincha for being tested as whether she was unfaithful or not, she has to bring a korban from Seorim. Nonetheless, if she came between Pesach and Shavuot, she had to bring it from last year's barley crop, not this year's barley crop. Okay, Ramban now is going to try to give us a little bit of insight into this whole concept of how do we understand what the timing of the bringing of the Omer is, and where do we learn that out from? First, he says, "Why ukitzatemet kitzira?" Again, same thing. Rashi said, "Shalotiksu ba'aretz kitzira shitiksu ha'omer v'taviro toreshit kitzichem al hakohen." Until the Omer has been harvested, we are not allowed to harvest any of the new crop. Again, to show, just like everything else we do, where we give the first of something to Hashem, so too the Omer and the shtei halechem. Both of these are to show that we are giving the choicest, the best, the first to Hashem, to acknowledge that everything comes from Hashem. And we have the same thing with Bikurim, we have the same thing with Truma. Many other of the gifts that the Torah says we are to set aside for either Kohanim, to give to the Kohanim, or to bring to the Beit HaMikdash, are all to remind us that everything we have, especially as we're coming into Eretz Yisrael, Hashem is giving us this land. As we started the parak with when you come into Eretz Yisrael, we have to remember always that this land is not something that we owned automatically. It's something we own because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave it to us as a gift, and we have to always, whenever we are partaking of something that comes from Eretz Yisrael, we have to always acknowledge HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the giver and grantor of Eretz Yisrael. So that's the whole underlying message of this whole Omer, counting of the Omer, bringing the shtei halechem. All of this is to constantly remind us, as we are going into the growing and harvesting season, to remind us that Eretz Yisrael is a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, we get to this concept of Mimocharat HaShabbat, which seems a very strange way for the Torah to say on the 16th of Nisan. Why didn't it just say the second day, the day after Pesach? Why Mimocharat HaShabbat? Mimocharat Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. Ramban first quotes Rashi, says it has to be the first day of the day after the first day of Pesach. Shimatom Shabbat Breshit Atoyodea Ezehu Lashon Rashi. Because if you're saying that it's an ordinary Shabbos, then which ordinary Shabbos do I pick? There are 50 to choose from in the year. How would I know which one to pick? Ube'emet, and he says, in reality, Shezugido Lasha Brayot Bigmara. The Gemara brings down 4 or 5 different proofs that are offered to prove that Mimocharat HaShabbat has to mean Mimocharat Yom Tov, and Ramban is saying this one that Rashi quotes is the greatest of them all. This is the most obvious, the most logical one. Kima tam shiomer hakatuv. What is the rationale that the Torah would say kitavol eretz ukitzatemet kitzira taviu et omer mimocharat Shabbat Breshit? If you come into Eretz Yisrael and you harvest the crop, you should bring an omer on the day following some Shabbos. Ki yesh b'mashma shebe'ezes ma'im min hashamash shenavol eretz nitzar kitzira yaniv hakohen omer mimocharat haShabbat harishona shetiyah achrei bi'atenu le'aretz. Seems to imply, if we want to understand this literally as being that it has to be a day after an ordinary Shabbat, then we would pick, when we got to Eretz Yisrael, we would pick the first Shabbos, we would start cutting whatever grain harvest was available, and we bring it to the Kohen. And therefore, and if that were the basis, then we have no way of knowing when to start counting the 7 weeks. How would we know when to count if every year it's based on whenever we feel like coming into Eretz Yisrael, we cut some grain and we bring it to the Kohen. The Ode, and similarly, and further, al derech hazel lo neida b'shanim habaot achrei kain matay nochel lispor. That might work the first year we get into Eretz Yisrael. Okay, we got into Eretz Yisrael here. Now next Shabbos, next Motzei Shabbos, we would cut some crops, bring them to the Kohen. But what are we going to do the next year? We won't have that same coming into Eretz Yisrael to measure it from. Only we would know from the time when the crops begin to grow and are cuttable. But we could decide, hey, they're ripe enough to cut. No, they're not ripe enough to cut. Well, let's decide. Let's see when do we want shiur to be. Then we can decide when to cut. The elu divrei tahu, and this seems to not be a very viable solution according to Ramban. If we translate Mimacharat HaShabbat as Yom Tov, as the day following Yom Tov, Kvi Kavalat Rabotenu, as we're told in Torah Shabbat Peh, Yavaho and Yan Kehugan, everything falls into place. Kitziva HaKatuv Tchila. First, the Torah tells us, we should make that then the order of the parsha of Emor, of all of these Chagim, fits in smoothly, because first we learn about the Chag HaMatzot, which we call Pesach, is 7 days. Yom Rishon Shabbaton, Yom HaShvi Shabbaton, the first and 7th days are Chagim, that we're not allowed to Chol Melachat Avodah Lo Nasa, we're not allowed to do any work. The Achar Kain Omar Ki Kasher Navo El Haaretz Navi Mimochar HaShabbat Hazo Haniskeret. After this Yom Tov that we've just talked about, Omer Tnufa V'Shabbat Harishonosh Haniskeret Kan. Because this is the first day that is called Shabbaton, is the first day of Pesach. And if you go through this whole parsha, the first day that's called the Shabbat is the first day of Pesach. So it makes logical sense that when the Torah uses B'machar HaShabbat in an seemingly ambiguous sense, it should refer to the first Shabbaton that we've talked about, which is the first day of Pesach. The limad, but the pasuk specifically wants to come and teach us that we did not bring the Omer in the 40 years when Bnei Yisrael were in the desert. They did not bring the Karban Omer. So you're going to say, how did they know when Shavuot was? Great question. I don't have an answer to that. I don't think Ramban's going to answer, but we'll see. I think in the course of the discussion, I think we'll resolve that. Just like we know, even though we don't bring the Karban Omer, we know when to start counting. They also knew when to start counting. But nonetheless, if all the Jews are outside of Eretz Yisrael, we also cannot bring the Karban Omer, only when Jews are living in Eretz Yisrael. Avo, Mimacharat HaShabbat HaShvi'it, the day following the 7th Shabbat, Uvesheva Shabbatot and 7 Shabbatot, Lo Yitachin the Parashot Tam Yom Tov. Impossible. We cannot translate those words Shabbat as being Yom Tov, even though we translated the first Mimacharat HaShabbat as being the day after Yom Tov. When we talk about Mimacharat HaShabbat HaShvi'it, we can't say, well, the 7th Yom, that the day after the 7th Yom Tov. We don't even have 7 Yom Tovs. Okay? Abal, Tirgem Ba, Unklos Lashon Shavua. But we follow what Unklos taught. Unklos obviously knew the translation that these Shabbats, when it says Shabbat in that context, it's the language of Shabbat meaning a week. And we have that in other cases, as Ramban's going to tell us later on. The Imkain. In one pasuk, we're going to have the word Shabbat having 2 different meanings. One meaning Yom Tov, and one meaning week. It's okay. That's all right. It's a clear language. Because in each one, it is understood from the context what Shabbat means. Even though we would say, wait a minute, you can't do that. You're using the same word for 2 different meanings. It doesn't make sense to do that in the same pasuk. Okay, if you're doing one in Breshit, one in Farm, that's okay. But how can you do 2 twice in the same pasuk? But he gives another example. He says, Kiro Rochim al Shalosham Ayarim Ushloshim Ayarim Lahem. One of the Shoftim, I forget which one as usual, is described as having 30 sons riding on 30 donkeys, and each of them had 30 cities, or they had 30 cities together. So you have the word Ayarim referring to donkeys, and Ayarim referring to cities, both in the same pasuk. So again, we have the same exact word, 2 different meanings in the same sentence. In English, you have that all the time, I guess. But that's because English is a different language. Now Ramban is going to say it, so you can see that it's okay to have a word meaning two different things in the same pasuk. And now Ramban is going to bring other places where Shabbat means Shavuah, means a week. And the first proof he brings is because it says later on in Dvarim, it says Shiva Shavuot Tisparlach. That when we count, we are counting Shiva Shavuot. So there it doesn't say Sheva Shabbatot. So clearly, our Sheva Shabbatot means the same thing as Shiva Shavuot in Sefer Dvarim, in Parshat Re'eh, where it talks about the Moedim. So therefore, it's very clear that Shabbat means Shavuah there. And similarly, he says, he brings another proof, by the Shabbat, in Yotzei Shabbat, those that come in at the end of the week and go out at the end of the week, where it's talking about the shifting of this changing of the Kohanim's Mishmarot, in the story with Atalia in Malachim Bet. But again, in each of these cases, he said the word Shabbat means Shavuah. V'chein, Matay Yavor HaChadash v'nishbra Shever v'Shabbat v'Shever v'niftacha bar, and another pasuk in Amos where again Shabbat there again means week. Ki bavur yesh b'chol shiva yamim Shabbat achat cheshbon hayamim mimenu. Why do we sometimes refer to the week by the word Shabbat? Because we know that every 7 days has at least one Shabbat in it, and only one Shabbat in it. And since we count the days from Shabbat, today is Yom Rishon b'Shabbat, Yom Sheni b'Shabbat, Yom Shlishi b'Shabbat, Yikari Shavua Echad, Shabbat Echad. It's also why the word for Shavua, the word Shabbat is often used to mean Shavua. Hu lashon yadua umurgal b'divrei Rabotenu. And we have it many, many times in Chazal, use this throughout the Talmud, use the word Shabbat to refer to a week. For example, he gives a Shabbat bet in Yoshim Bayarot, twice a week, and again uses the word Shabbat for week. The courts would have sessions Mondays and Thursdays usually. And it would be, it would make sense that all the other times Shabbat is mentioned in our parsha means week. And the reason is Mimacharat HaShabbat, Lomar, Ki biyom hanafat haOmer. From the day we bring the Omer, Yatchil asod hashavua b'minyano. That's when we count. As we know, when we count the Omer, we count there's so many weeks and so many days. And if you go back, what was day zero? Day zero was the day that we brought the Omer. In other words, when you count, today is day one in the Omer, it's the day we brought the Omer. When we get to 8, it's 1 day in the next week, which again it was the same day. That the day of the Tnufa is the end of the 7 days that preceded, and it's the beginning of the next week. And that begins the new week until we count 7 of them. Since the Torah started with the 15th day of Nisan, Omer Shenifat Omer Mimacharat Hashavua Haniskar, that the 15th day is the end of the previous week, and we start on the day after that by bringing the Omer and Nispar Mimenu Sheva Shavuot, and that's the day we begin counting the 7 weeks. So he calls week Shabbatot because it's, as I said, because of the connection between Shabbat and a week. The Ainli Dot Biyomar Ba'asar, and we would not have confused it with the 14th day, because the 14th day, when we bring the Karban Pesach, is only the prelude to the Chag. It's not the Shabbaton. It's the Erev Pesach, when we bring the Karban Pesach, is not a Shabbaton. Finally, he says, because when we count 7 days, it's including a Shabbat, it makes a full week. So therefore, it has to be Tzimot full. He says, even though the Torah uses the term Mimacharat HaShabbat, from the day following Shabbat, it's Kamo Bimacharat HaShabbat. It's as if it had written Bimacharat HaShabbat on the day following the Shabbat. Even though Mimacharat literally means from the day following the day after Shabbat, But mimacharat is the way that in Hebrew we never say bimacharat, we always say mimacharat. And he brings many different cases. I'm going to skip the rest of it because that's all he goes through. Okay. Now he gets into the actual counting, Rabban. The tam usifartem lachem, that we are to count for ourselves. Tomorrow is very similar to ulakachtem lachem. We are told concerning the lulav and esrog that the arba minim, that ulakachtem lachem, we are to take for ourselves. Why the plural? Because each sfira ulakicha lekol echad v'echad. That lachem is speaking to you collectively, but each individual has to take his own. In other words, each individual has to perform the mitzvah of arba minim by himself. Each individual has to perform the mitzvah of sfira by himself. Sheyimne, and here concerning the sfira, sheyimne befiv v'yazkir cheshbono kasher kiblu rabotenu. That he has to mention it, count it verbally by expressing it, and he has to remember the count. In other words, the objective of this is to remember what day it is so that you won't forget when Shavuot arrives. The Ein Kan V'Safar Lo. This is not like V'Safar Lo or V'Safar Lo that he individually should count for himself or she individually should count for himself. That the Torah says V'Zavin concerning counting clean days when somebody has had a discharge that renders them tamei. Sharei Im Ratzu Omdim Mitumatam. There, it's optional. You don't want to count. You don't want to become tahor. You don't have to become tahor. You don't have to count. You can stay tamei. No problem. However, here. But when they start counting, they have to remember what day of the count they're up to. Similarly, when the betin is told that they are to count yovel, you have to be careful. Don't forget what number you're up to, which is probably a little harder when you're counting years than when you're counting days. How many years did we count last year? If you don't have it written down, you probably would come to forget. And that's why we are told that the mitzvah of counting for Yovel and Shemitah is bebetin, has to be done by the betin in a very public forum where you figure, okay, with all these 70 elders, one of them is going to remember, or at least write it down and keep a good diary. V'lo yadati, im lomer shiu best nagadoch hayavim lis parshanim ushvot rosh kol shana. I'm not really sure if Ramban says, I'm not sure if that means that the Beth Din had an obligation to sit on Rosh Hashanah. And the first thing they did, the first order of business on Rosh Hashanah was to say, okay, this year is year so-and-so. We'll levarech aleim, k'moshe nasa b'sfirat Omer. To make a bracha. Bracha to Hashem, we make a bracha, shekichanim mitzosav, v'tzvanu al sfirat Hashanim. That Hashem counted us, the commands we're supposed to count the year. And just like we do with Sfirat Omer, and they get up and say, today is year 15 of the Yovel, of the Shemitah cycle. He says, I don't know if they did that. Oh, Lomar, or the purpose of is that they need to keep track of what year it is and count the 50th year. But again, that's the only parallel we have to counting 7 times 7 and plus 1, and then the 50th becomes holy, is of course the Yovel, and similar here. But again, the difference there is it's v'safarta lacha in singular, that you as the Jewish people have to count the years. Whereas here it's by Sfirat HaOmer, it's Safartam Lachem. Every individual has the obligation to count by himself. Okay. Binei. And he goes, he says the numbers are the same. They have the same rationale. Al Kain Tisbu Chamishim Yom. She is Bar Shiva Sheva Shavatot Teshav Yarbaim Yom Mikadish Yom Chamishim An Yispar Biyado Kamo Shomer Yovel. Just like with Yovel, we count 7 cycles of 7 years, and the 50th is sanctified. Here too, we count 7 weeks of 7. The significance of 7, of course, is that anytime we have something in Judaism that focuses on 7, it's a reminder of the fact that the world has a creator who created the world, Yachol, in 7 stages, 7 steps, 7 days, whatever we want to call it. But that whole concept, anytime we have something where we count 7 or cycles of 7, is related to acknowledging HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the creator, not that the world was here all by itself or came into being by itself. Does that time to be mot? That's why it has to be full. Has to be no less, no more, because if you're missing, it's no better than if you had more. So you have to have exactly the right count. Okay, we're going to stop here because and continue with one last thought, and that is figuring out how we, as I said, I could keep going with Rambam forever, but I'm running short on time already. Okay, I want to get to Klei Akar because the Klei Akar is going to discuss the second half of the question I want to raise is why do we connect Shavuot, or not why? Why doesn't the Torah connect Shavuot A to a specific day and B to the giving of the Torah? Siman liyom matan Torah. This, the fact that it says on this 50th day, we are to bring a new offering to Hashem is a siman. This is the siman. This is the hint that it is the day of the giving of the Torah. Why? That every day when I approach learning Torah, it has to be, I have to approach it with a freshness, with a excitement, as if today I'm receiving it at Har Sinai. Every day I have to look at it fresh. Don't say, oh man, I've learned this before. I've been through this every year. We go through the same thing all the time. Enough already. No, we have to look at it each day as a new opportunity, a new beginning, something that's new. And Klei Akar is saying that by using the phrase Mincha Chadasha, the Torah is alluding to this fact that every day we have to approach Torah with a freshness, with a newness. Now, Umashalo Nizkar b'Torah b'Feirush ki Yom Zeh Matan Torah. Why doesn't the Torah itself tell us this is the day we're celebrating and commemorating the day of Ma'amad Har Sinai, that Hashem appeared to all of Am Yisrael on Har Sinai? But similarly, he also says the Torah never tells us Ki Rosh Hashanah Hu Yom Adin. We are never told, Rosh Hashanah is never called Yom Adin. Called Yom HaZikaron, it's called Yom Teruah, but it's never called Yom Adin. Where do we get the idea that Hashem judges us on Yom Adin? The Tam Shneim Echadhu. The reason why the day of the Torah, that Shavuot is not connected to the giving of the Torah in the Torah, and Rosh Hashanah is not connected to Yom Adin in the Torah, they're both the ssame reason. As he writes in the Sefer Olod Ephraim. Hashem did not want to set aside a specific day as the day that the Torah was given. Every day I have to imagine and I have to feel as though I'm getting the Torah fresh from Har Sinai, from Hashem. Has to be always fresh. Emet, Amru Chazal, as the Gemara tells us in Eruvin, Shatorah Nimshla Ladad. The Torah is like like mother's milk. Shekol man shatinok mashmish bahu motze batam chadash. Whenever the child tastes milk from his mother, it has a fresh taste to it. Kacha Torah kol hahogeba. Whoever studies the Torah, motze b'chol yom tam chadash. Every day you find something new in it. You can find new insights into the Torah, a new flavor, a new taste, a new direction to go through, to look at the Torah. The Al-Kain, Din Hushi Yadoma Elav B'chol Yom Kilo Yom Kibla Mehar Sinai. Since every day he has the opportunity to uncover new and fresh insights, it should be every day should appear to him as if that is the day he's receiving the Torah from Har Sinai. The Im-Kain, Kol Yom Hu Matan Torah Eitz Al-Hagimba. Every day of the year is Matan Torah for those who are sitting and studying Torah and learning Torah all the time. Therefore, it's not appropriate to set aside and attach the giving of the Torah to only one day. The Al-Kain Amru Chazal, that's what the Gemara said, the Chazal teach us in Tifrei, Sheyu divrei Torah chadashim alecha v'lo kedavar hayashan shalibo k'shel adam katzba. Torah needs to be fresh every day, not like something old and stale that you're tired and sick of and enough of already. Torah needs to be fresh every day. If you really look and study, you'll find something new every day. Therefore, the only appearance that we have of the Torah being given on this day is the fact that it calls it a mincha chadasha, a new mincha. Torah mincha chadasha b'chol yom yom. That the Torah that we, Hashem gave us, is a gift, a new gift every day. It's a fresh gift every day. Every day we have an opportunity to take out this gift and use it and learn something new and make it a new gift. That's one of our goals of the Chag. Now, Bezatam Gam came. Yom Din Shel Rosh Hashanah. This is also the reason why the Torah hides the day of Rosh Hashanah. Kedei shelo yelech adam b'shmirot libo, that a person shouldn't go off on his merry way. Yisagel avonot kol yimot Hashanah, and he should pile up sins all year long. V'yachshel l'takin masa v'yoto karv liyom Hashem. Okay, it's a little time. Still got plenty of time. Oh, slicho time. Okay, okay, we're getting close to Hashem. Maybe I'm going to start thinking about doing tshuva now. Okay, v'yoto karov liyom Hashem ashebo yashav al kisei din. He's going to wait. I'll wait until I get closer to Yom Adin, then I'll fix everything. But one should always think as though I should feel and act as though every day Hashem is sitting in judgment. And he's checking my record. He's opening my record book every day and checking it. For that, person will focus on doing tshuva and making sure he's doing the right thing all year long, not just on the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah. And similarly, there is an opinion in the Gemara that a person is judged every day. As the pasuk tells us, that you visit us every morning and test us and check and see how we're doing every moment. And again, later in Iyar says, if you go through, you read through his Olot Ephraim, his Sefer, he has a long arichut on this to explain that not everything in the Torah is there primarily for our own benefit, so that we shouldn't take things for granted. And it's clear in these two instances of Rosh Hashanah, of judgment, that Hashem clearly is watching what we're doing all year long. It's not just on Rosh Hashanah. Not that on Rosh Hashanah we shouldn't also feel a little bit more trepidation, but we should feel a little bit of that trepidation all year long. So too, when we approach the Torah all year long, not just on Shavuot should we say, it's a new year, a new beginning. All year long, we should be approaching Torah with a freshness, with an outlook that says we're starting from scratch. We're starting all over again, and we can uncover something new. And a lot of times the challenge is really, as we're studying the parsha especially, to say, okay, well, I did this last year, here's what I learned. No, go back, fresh slate, start all over again, try to see if you can find something new in the parsha. And when we're able to do that, to grow in Torah and to grow not only in our understanding of Torah, but our observance of Torah, then we're sure we're on the right path, and we will ultimately get there someday, and we will be able to be zocha to kula shleim v'meher v'yameinu. Thank you all. Questions, comments, feedback at this point? Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. If not, I will say thank you all for joining. Have a good evening. Have a good rest of the week. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will see you next week. Take good care.